The top orb, without budget, from the other two underneath, started to implode. It's like a dimmer switch. It was mechanical, as if there was an intelligence behind it.
While reports of flying saucers dominated UFO sightings for an entire generation, today there's a new type of craft that seems to be threatening our skies. It's fast, it's mysterious, and to me it's a lot more frightening than its predecessor. It's the Black Triangle. This is the Basement Office. And again, we're here joined by Nick Pope, the Fox Mulder of Great Britain. Let's talk about the triangles. Now, when did these things start popping up?
There are some reports going back as far as the 50s, but really the modern black triangle, flying triangle mystery really takes off, I guess, in the 80s.
We have witness reports throughout the 60s and 70s, but they're sporadic. And then, as you would say, on come the waves. And that brings us to 1980 and the now infamous Rendlesham Forest Triangle.
It's been called Britain's Roswell.
And these are military personnel, U.S. Air Force personnel, go into the forest to investigate lights, and they see this, I think they estimated 10 foot solid black triangle, and it levitates.
And this thing, unlike most UFOs, actually landed. So he really did get up close and personal with it.
Rendlesham, of course, you could write a whole book about. In fact, you did write a whole book about Rendlesham. Our next episode actually is going to focus completely on this crazy incident. But for sake of this episode, we're going to move on and chronologically follow this triangle around the world. The next, chronologically speaking, seem to be the Hudson Valley sightings.
Sure. The Hudson Valley sightings are really bizarre, but unlike Rendlesham, this thing is much bigger. I mean, we're talking here, some of the witnesses will talk about these things being the size of football fields, but hovering or moving very slowly in the sky and then accelerating away to the horizon at an incredible rate.
Thousands of witnesses describe seeing massive objects in the sky, outlined by colorful lights. But I Skyped with one of the few who managed to film what she saw.
We were actually driving down Route 84, going eastbound, when we saw this thing in the sky. So when we got home, we thought we lost it, and my husband went to let the dog out, and he called me and he said, "You got to see this, come out here, it's back." So when we saw this object in the sky, the first thing we did is we ran in and grabbed the video camera and just started taking images of it. It was a ring of lights, but when this round object flew over, we could not see through it. The lights were actually, you could see by a naked eye, you can't see it in the video, but the lights are actually turning. They were turning to the left, and they started changing colors as they turned.
While many accounts described V-shaped or boomerang-shaped objects, Lori says she saw it from a different perspective.
The way people are describing it is based on where they were standing. Some people were standing directly underneath it. So could it have been a V-type shape formation or a boomerang shape? It's possible, yes. From where I was standing, I was more east of the object, so I could have been looking at it from a different angle.
It's constant. It's night after night, week after week, month after month of the same thing, correct?
Yes, and people are beginning to think, why aren't the authorities doing something? Or maybe the authorities know all about this and maybe there's nothing they can do. But the people there feel almost as if they're under siege.
My stepdaughter was up the road and she had called us and she was watching it with her friends up the road. They were very scared. A lot of people had different reactions. They held a lot of community gatherings after this sighting had been seen. And people were blaming the government. Other people wanted the government to tell them what was going on. Other people were afraid. You had some people coming back saying they were abducted. there was a mix of people.
From what I understand of the Hudson Valley wave, people are calling 911, people are calling airports, and police officers are showing up and seeing these things also, and reporting that they have seen these things.
Yes,
Correct.
You think that the police are going to turn up and be the ones to debunk this, but as you say, the police turn up, and heck, if there's this huge great thing just hanging in the sky, of course they're going to see it too, and that's why, yes, we have many police witnesses.
Did the government ever come out, investigate, say anything?
The problem with all this is at the time, we were in that era where the official position of the US government was, we don't investigate UFOs. We now know with the revelations about the Pentagon's ATIP program that that was probably not entirely correct. However, the government was in a very difficult position in the 80s. If they turned out overtly and investigated, turned up, started interviewing witnesses on the doorstep, making paper trail of government documents, they would have basically blown their own position out of the water. So if there was government investigation, it went on behind closed doors.
Someone from the Army had come to my house to investigate the tape, to make sure that the tape was authentic and it was not something that we made up or we created.
Is it possible that what you filmed that night was a formation of planes?
No, it's already been and analyzed. It was not planes.
Or flares?
Nope. It's not something they've never seen before.
The constant frustrating thing for me is to read about these cases, to read the police reports, the official reports, the photographs, and to see complete inaction. And almost they go out of the way to show their disinterest in something so massive and that's freaking people out. Their citizens are scared of this.
Yes, and I was part of that same policy in the UK. Consistently, we downplayed the true extent, the very large extent of our own interest and involvement in this subject. The answer to the question that, why aren't people doing more? What are the government going to do? Is they can't stop it. They don't know what it is. They can't do anything about it. And no government would ever come out overtly and say there's something in our skies, it's faster than us, it's more maneuverable than us, we chase them, we can't catch them, we track them on radar, we have no idea, sorry. No government can, that's not tenable.
No, but you just said that you played a role in downplaying to the public.
Yes.
Something would happen and it was your role to downplay it to the people, right?
Sadly, yes.
So you were part Mulder and cigarette smoking.
Yes, I had this kind of split identity, I guess, but it was government policy. And, somewhere in those X-Files, there are even some papers that come out and say this. It was consistently UK government policy to downplay this subject. Partly, as I say, it's just the sheer embarrassment of saying there are things in our airspace and we don't know what they are.
Let's jump across the Atlantic from the Hudson Valley to Belgium. In 1990, another wave of triangles hits Belgium.
Sure, actually from 89 through to 90 and culminating on one particular night, there is this wave of sightings. And when I say wave, let me just contextualize this. I'm talking about hundreds of sightings over a period of just a few months in a very small, when you think about it in global terms, geographical area. So this wave of sightings with many of the witnesses being police officers. For example, I've seen reports of police officers on patrol jumping into their car, trying to chase some object that they've seen, picking up the phone, calling the Air Force, saying, what's going on in our skies? And then there's this one night, March 30th, late on March 30th, early hours March 31st, 1990, a huge triangular UFO is seen over large parts of Belgium. The Belgian Air Force track it on radar on both the Belgian national radar system and that's part of the wider NATO integrated air defense system. They scramble two F-16 fighter interceptors those jets go up. The pilots get a lock on to this object with their airborne radars. So it's been tracked on the ground, in the air. The pilots are repeatedly vectored towards this UFO. And every time they get close, the UFO breaks the radar lock, moves, the pilots have to reacquire it, and a game of virtual cat and mouse takes place in the skies over Belgium.
At what point is that famous photo taken from the underneath?
Now, that I believe was taken at some stage on that particular night. I don't know at exactly what time, and actually the original photo is quite dark, but when you try and touch it up a little, a craft seems to emerge out of the darkness.
The main thing that I take away from Belgium before we move on is, of all the people in different places there who saw something, many of them were either interviewed, asked to draw something, this person over here and this person, and when you look at the collection of drawings and sketches and descriptions, it's eerily similar.
Absolutely, it is the same craft. And by the way, I have spoken to the Belgian general, Wilfred de Brouwer, who led the official investigation into this, and he talked me through this in great detail. And also, when I was at the Ministry of Defence doing the job on the UFO program, we made inquiries of the Belgians through our embassy, and we spoke to General de Brouwer, we spoke to the two F-16 pilots. The official conclusion of the Belgian government, I mean, they came out and said so, is this was real, and we have no idea what it was.
Approximately 140 UFO sightings were reported. Hundreds of people saw a majestic triangular craft with a span of approximately 120 feet. Powerful beaming spotlights moving very slowly without making any significant noise, but in several cases accelerating to very high speeds. In short, the Belgian UFO wave was exceptional, and the Air Force could not identify the nature, origin, and intentions of the reported phenomena. Thank you very much.
Oh my God, dude. And it's the Belgian government officially, on the record, publicly, is like, that's a UFO.
Yes, there are declassified Belgian Air Force documents that set all this out.
I've read into the Belgian wave. We're not going to go any further into it, but I suggest anyone watching, there are some crazy details behind these sightings. Let's jump back across the Atlantic to Arizona, 97. Now I know the Phoenix Lights, one of the most famous bulk wave sightings ever.
Do these lights belong to visitors from outer space? Hundreds of people across the valley think it's a distinct possibility.
Eyewitnesses who saw it say it's like nothing they've ever seen before.
UFO watchers are calling it a dramatic event.
And folks who witnessed this strange sighting are calling it simply unexplainable.
So I did a Skype interview with Dr. Lynn Katai, who took video footage of the Phoenix Lights. And this footage has been used everywhere. It's famous footage, and this is what she has to say about it.
The first time I had an experience with the Phoenix Lights, this was less than 100 yards from our home, and it was a uniform amber color throughout, and it didn't glare at all. Every other light out there glared, and as we both watched, the top orb, without budget, from the other two underneath, started to implode. It's very difficult to describe in logical terms, because it was like a dimmer switch. It was mechanical, as if there was an intelligence behind it, and got smaller and smaller, slowly getting smaller and smaller till it was pea-size, and then disappeared. Nothing even remotely similar to these orbs showed up for 2 years, until 2 months before the mass sighting. This was January 1997. I noticed 3 huge orbs, but at a distance. So I ran downstairs, I grabbed my video camera, I get out to the pool area. I got about 18 seconds worth, and the battery went dead. and it was fully charged. I run in, I grab my 35 millimeter, I run outside on the balcony. As I'm ready to shoot the 3, suddenly 6 lights across, equidistant from each other, massive span, over a mile wide, pops up over the 3. It was unnerving. And when analyzed, and all my photographic evidence was analyzed extensively by university and military optical experts, and the conclusion were that these lights were true unknowns, that whatever I captured on 35 millimeter to this day cannot be explained or denied. And many people on March 13th, 1997, thousands of people, saw actual craft.
I spoke to a witness who, and I said to try and get a sense of this, well, how big was this thing and how low was it? And he said to me, Nick, if I had thrown a rock at this, I would have hit the underside of it. Everyone was just stopped. Cars were pulled up. They were looking out. They were pointing. And so for every witness we have, and we have like dozens if not hundreds, there are probably hundreds if not thousands more who saw it, but who have never come forward officially and gone on the record.
Years later, the governor himself comes out to admit that he also, this is of course once he's retired and it won't kill his career, comes out and says, yeah, I also saw it that night. I saw a triangular craft.
I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality. I witnessed a massive delta-shaped craft that silently navigated over the Squaw Peak area in North Phoenix in the evening, and it was truly breathtaking.
And it was just such a cool moment for those other witnesses to have their former governor kind of back them up.
It was, but of course that's quite controversial because at the time...
he treated it like a joke.
He treated it like a joke. He did a press conference.
In costume.
And what he did is he said, we have identified the culprit. And he had his chief of staff come out dressed in an alien suit.
Don't get him too close to me, please. It's, you know. Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
Well, of course, it got a laugh, and the media then treated it as a joke. He subsequently apologized for that. He said, frankly, the only reason he did that is he was worried that the whole situation was descending into almost mass hysteria.
We managed to lessen the sense of panic at the time, but I also upset quite a few of my constituents. Well, I'd like now to set the record straight. I never meant to ridicule anyone. My office did make inquiries as to the origin of the craft, but to this day they remain unanswered.
Has there ever been an official statement on this incident?
Some of the military, I believe, put out a statement to say that there had been maybe some military exercise going on involving aircraft dropping flares.
Flares, right.
The military says the lights over Arizona last night were flares, but the people who saw the lights last night say they couldn't have been flares. The lights were too bright.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because you investigate these things, but flares, they fall.
Yeah.
And then the wind separates them. And what we're observing in the Phoenix lights are lights that are consistent distance from each other, and they don't deviate.
So one theory about the aircraft is that, of course, those aircraft would have been scrambled, as we know military jets are often scrambled, to investigate the UFOs. So, yeah, I'm not saying that there were no aircraft there, and maybe some of them later, around 10 in the evening, dropped flares, but because they too were part of maybe an operation to try and find out what the heck this thing was.
And this takes us later to Illinois, in St. Clair, Illinois in 2000, where we see very similar triangles to the Phoenix lights. Okay, so I actually Skyped with David Marler, who literally wrote the book on triangular UFOs. I did a Skype interview with him. Here's some things that he had to say. Tell me about St. Clair, Illinois in 2000.
An over-the-road truck driver was coming home late one morning. He happens to see this extremely bright light off to the northeast. Within a matter of a few minutes, as he's standing there, this light, which is obviously now, as it comes closer, is a light affixed to a large object, silently, very gently floats over the tree line and he notices it slowly disappear to the southwest. He immediately notifies the police of what he had just witnessed. They weren't sure if he was altogether there, reporting a UFO, but he was very emphatic that if you contact Lebanon, Illinois police, they should see it, because it was basically that trajectory, which is the direction it was heading in. They contact Officer Ed Barton, and he's making a joke about it initially. We have the dispatch tapes where you can hear the officers talking to each other. But very shortly, his skepticism erodes.
There's a very bright white light east of town. Looks like it's just east of Summerfield. And it keeps changing colors. I'll go there and see if maybe it's an aircraft. It doesn't look like an aircraft, though.
The object came directly overhead, and what he witnessed was a large, essentially isosceles triangle.
This object was above me about 500 feet, and it was huge.
The object, as it's hovering there, made a flat turn like that. It didn't bank like conventional aircraft where you have a large turn radius. Made a flat turn, executed that maneuver, and then rapidly accelerated in the blink of an eye to the southwest. He immediately gets on the radio, states, well, whatever it is, it seems to be headed towards Shiloh, which was the direction of the next neighboring town in that direction.
10-4, well, whether it's a plane or not, it's heading westbound now. It should be really close to Scott now.
And the other officer in Shiloh states immediately, yeah, I see it, but I don't know what the heck it is.
2550, I see something, but I don't know what the heck it is.
So we have these officers in radio contact as they're visually tracking this object. And it was then cited subsequent to that by two other police officers and another officer that came forward later, and we were able to establish the flight path of this UFO.
I've got that object inside also. Are you serious? It's huge.
It was, most witnesses described it as triangular in shape with various lighting characteristics. But all of them, with the exception of one, stated it was completely silent. One officer said he thought he heard a slight humming or droning sound with the object, but highly unusual. What's interesting about the case is the caliber of the witnesses, the fact that it flew in very close proximity to Scott Air Force Base, within 1 to 2 miles, yet Scott Air Force Base denied any knowledge of it. We have an official statement that they weren't testing or supporting the test of any aircraft in that area at that time. The radar system was down, so we didn't have any radar data associated with that. The ability for this object to hover, rapidly accelerate, and do so with a complete absence of a sonic boom is highly suggestive that this is someone else's technology.
And 4 years later, there was another mass sighting in Illinois. So we have the footage of this, but basically in Tinley Park, on more than one night, a large triangular formation of lights is seen over the city, videotaped by residents. When they zoom in on the lights give off a cherry red, with almost, it looks like a rainbow of lights spinning in each of these things. And again, I think to the naked eye, these look like three individual things, as I think people saw the Phoenix lights as individual little lights.
What we're looking at very often with these triangular UFOs is a flat triangle with the witnesses essentially being underneath it.
You're suggesting that these are actually attached on the corners of a craft.
Yes, you're looking at three lights at each tip of the triangle, and very often, and it's interesting, we see this with Tinley Park, I think, a hint of a fainter, maybe whiter light bang in the center of the underside of this thing. Now, are any of these things navigation lights, and in which case why would they need lights, or are they connected, as many believe, with the propulsion system of this UFO?
In this age where everyone's got a cell phone that shoots 4K video in their pocket, where are the Phoenix lights now? Where are the Tinley Park lights? Where are the Hudson Valley lights? Now would be a great time to get them on cell phone video or something now. Where'd they go, or are we due for a return?
This is an events-led phenomenon, and I think your second point was probably the answer. We are overdue for a huge mass sighting, and in this modern age, with ubiquitous cell phones and things. Yes, if something on the scale of Hudson Valley or Phoenix Lights happens today, it will be undeniable. There will be hundreds, if not thousands, of high quality photos and videos. Nobody will be able to deny it, and maybe, just maybe, it will push the whole question over the line. It will take us from a situation where we have evidence to a situation where we have absolutely definitive proof.
Well, I can't wait, Nick. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It could be a while. It could be next week. It could be tonight. That's why I say this is events led. You just never know when the next absolutely mega case is going to hit. You may have another Roswell tomorrow. You may have another Hudson Valley the day after. You may have another Rendlesham next week.
Now, what I haven't told you yet is that I've actually seen one of these black triangles. And in the next episode, I'm going to share my personal encounter